All right. Good morning. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the June's Hump Day, the Bill Guston Hump Day Hangout. Glad you're here. And also we're glad that our friends Key Fire Hose are still with us. We appreciate all the support they give us. It is definitely the best hose on the market, undoubtedly. I just wish my agency would buy it, but we don't. So right now we're going to go around, just introduce everybody. Daryl Liggins, quick introduction.
Good morning. Daryl Liggins, retired Oakland captain. And yeah, you guys know who I am. Been doing this for a little while together.
Yeah, perfect. Dan Shaw.
Hey, good afternoon. On the right coast, not where Daryl is, where it's still morning. Dan Shaw, retired ops chief from Fairfax County, and coming to you from beautiful Myrtle Beach for the South Carolina Firefighters Conference, which I just found out that they give free entry to every South Carolina firefighter to this conference for 4 days, which is incredible. And great to hear conferences doing that for their state firefighters.
Yep, absolutely. That's admirable for sure. That is admirable for sure. Jimmy Davis, what's going on with Jimmy Davis's world?
Hey guys, hey Clark, what's going on? Jimmy Davis here, Chicago Fire, not the TV show. I want to make sure I put that out there too. I'm a fire geek, man, and I love these discussions. I think I'm the only guy that it takes an hour and a half to watch 60 Minutes.
Yep.
And then for Dan, I see all the pillows in the background, man. It looks like you're being propped up when you're sleeping, huh?
It's like weekend at Bernie's.
Yeah.
How long you been retired now, Dan?
July will be a year.
1 year in July. Good for you, brother.
Hard to believe.
Good for you.
What are you teaching there, Dan?
Somehow I hoodwinked them and let me do the keynote tomorrow, and then doing a class on command and control.
Oh, that's awesome. Good for you.
Perfect. And we have a guest with us today from the West Metro Colorado Fire Department. We have Sean O'Hara. Correct, Sean?
Yep.
Sean O'Hara. Go ahead and introduce yourself, brother.
Yeah, Sean O'Hara from West Metro. We're a western suburb of the Denver metro area. And I'm a division chief, shift commander for the B shift now. I just moved this morning. It's my first day on B shift. So the shift commander for B shift.
Welcome to B shift, brother.
I was a B shifter for a long time. They moved me.
You know what they say about B shift, man?
Let's hear it.
Everyone's got a B shift.
Everyone's got a B shift. Yeah, everyone's got a B shift. And it's usually B is for best, right? Yeah. That's why we don't have an S shift, because S shift sucks.
You hold on to that, Clark.
Yeah. I'm gonna ride that into the ground.
Well,
all right.
Sean, for people not familiar with West Metro, can you tell us about the organization?
Yeah,
size and activity and all.
Yeah, we got 17 firehouses. We run a fire-based DMS 3-2 staffing model with engines and medics. Got 4 truck companies, 17 firehouses. Ran about 46,000 calls last year out of those firehouses. Like anybody else, we have a really busy sort of north corridor, the street that runs from one end of Denver to the other. Colfax got a couple firehouses up there. They're real busy. And then as you go further south, our risk gets a lot bigger, because that's where our interface risk becomes terrifying, but our volume slows down a lot. So I think pretty similar to a lot of those diverse. We're a special district. We're not a city, but similar to a lot of special districts, kind of a busy urban area, and then it transitions down to a slower but higher risk urban interface sort of area up against the foothills.
Yeah, are you on an engine company or a ladder company, or
I'm
not an ambulance? But
I rode the ambulance for a long time. I'm now a shift commander on a division chief. So I oversee all 3 battalions, and we still work shift work. We were 4896, so I still work 4896 and just kind of make sure the wheels don't come off for 2 days.
Yeah,
that's a full time to walk around with a wrench tightening those lugs every day, don't you?
Yeah, my Fairfax guy, I got a bunch of buddies in Baltimore City. I worked there for a little while, and my brother was on the job there for a long time. He got hurt, and got put out on disability. Yeah, I lived in Baltimore.
I'm born and raised in Baltimore, my friend.
Yeah, my
Still live there.
my wife's family's all from the city of Baltimore, and we lived there for a couple of years. Worked there.
Oh, very good. I knew I liked you.
A lot of fire duty there.
Yeah. I moved back to Colorado, so I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bet you have
I'm
some
not the
stories.
smartest guy. I just like it.
Absent from the chat today is Mike Dugan, our brother from FDNY, retired ladder 123. He's not feeling real well. He's got a doctor's appointment today, so our thoughts are with our brother Mike. We hope the doctor appointment turns out today. All right. So the reason we have this topic today, which is going to be searching the difference between searching occupied structures and vacant structures, mostly large commercial structures. And the reason I chose this topic for today is I'm on Facebook the other day, and someone, I'm not sure who exactly, posted from West Metro. They showed a picture of a fire that West Metro ran on in a car wash, a vacant car wash, and it was all boarded up, and they pulled 2, 3, 4 people out of this car wash. And I must admit, when I read that, I thought, this is not even on my radar. If I'm responding to a vacant car wash on fire, it is not even on my radar. And so I reached out to Chief O'Hara, and we talked about this, and I thought this is going to be a great topic. So the difference between searching occupied structures and unoccupied structures. Mark, can you put up that Walmart picture for us, please? All right. So rescue profile. I call a rescue profile is how many people do you think the fire department is going to have to actually go in and rescue these people? So here's an example. Walmart, Saturday afternoon. I'm sure everyone has a Walmart in their first in, and it probably looks like this every Saturday. All right. In your opinion, what is the rescue profile in this Walmart? Is it going to be high, medium, low? Are we going to save hundreds of people? We're going to save 4 people. What do you think? And the answer is actually very, very low for an occupied structure like Walmart. As many people are in this building right now, if we have a well-established fire, statistically speaking, we are not going to have to rescue any people out of this building because, first of all, everybody is awake and conscious, and they're going to have plenty of time to evacuate. And in addition, it's the size of the building. A Walmart is at least, a small Walmart's 100,000 square feet. The roof on the Walmart is 30 feet high. So doing the math, that is 3 million cubic feet of air inside of a Walmart. So Walmart has to absorb 3 million cubic feet of smoke before that smoke gets down to a level that it's actually going to prevent people from escaping on their own. That's going to take 15, 20 minutes for that to happen.
And you don't have a second floor for people to get trapped above fire.
Exactly. Yep. Exactly. So rescue profile on an occupied Walmart, and Home Depot's, all your big ones, IKEA's, Costco, you name it, is very, very low. Statistically speaking now, when we respond to vacant structures, and when I say a vacant structure, I mean that is not closed for the night. I mean closed for business, boarded up. That's what I'm calling a vacant structure. All right. Our chances of rescuing people out of vacant structures are much higher, statistically speaking, because of our homeless population. Everyone in the chat right now is from a major city, and we all have homeless issues in our cities. So these people have to live somewhere. So when we are responding to unoccupied vacant structures, our chance of locating people are much higher. First of all, because their people are asleep. All right. They do have an ignition source in there. They're using candles. They're using space heaters. They're using camping stoves to cook. And in addition, the majority of the openings are boarded up. So it's easier to get trapped inside one of these structures. And that's what I want to talk to Sean here. And Sean's going to go through what happened when he responded to a vacant car wash fire in West Metro. Go ahead, Sean.
So I think it would be worth the effort. And if I wander out of my lane or get too far off base, hopefully you guys will put me back in where I belong. But I think it'd be relevant to just comment a little on organizationally. I shy away from the words of cult-like words that tend to cause reactions, but I can't think of any to use here, so I'll be careful. But we're a pretty aggressive organization. We teach our recruits to search ahead of the hose line coming straight out of the academy. So they're allowed to leave the hose line and search rooms. We do VES or VEIS, and I don't want to get into a big vernacular debate, have anybody yell at me if they've got a strong position on one acronym or the other, but we do that regularly. Like we will do whatever it is that an individual fire calls for, whatever that tactic is. Sometimes we go to the roof, sometimes we don't. We'll search without hose lines, we'll search in front of the fire, we'll search, above the fire if the need will be. And I think that it's relevant that we don't necessarily make a bunch of noise about it. So I don't know, how much you would hear about that from our people, but it's just normalized. It's just how it's always been, and it's what we do. And I think that's relevant in that that and another word that I hate because it's so nebulous, but that culture, that organizational norm led to a lot of decisions being made by the company officer of the first arriving crew that actually made the whole thing really easy for me and created a successful outcome. And so basically, that part being said, a little just background on how the organization functions, because I'm not the most well-traveled, fire department employee, but in the travels I've done, you get a full swath of like, we will never go to the roof. We always go to the roof. We never search without a hose line. We always search without a hose line. And so I thought it was relevant to paint a picture of we'll do any of those things, right? Whatever that moment calls for, we try to train our people, and we expect a lot out of our people as thinkers. They're not followers. They're definitely thinkers. And so I just thought that part was a little relevant. It's different from other organizations I've worked at where that's not the case, where every fire you lay in or every fire you do X. We're not a every fire you do anything kind of organization. So that being said, the captain was on engine 7 that day, is one of our better top decision makers. So they had seen the building before, they were around it. They knew that, or at least suspected that people were living in it. So they also recognized straight out of the barn that, as Clark kind of alluded to a little bit, there's no reason for that building to be on fire if there aren't people in there. There's no electricity to it. There's none of the things that would normally would be a source of ignition were there. So they suspected with a pretty high level of index prior to leaving the barn that there were going to be people in there. So when they arrived, we also, and again, I don't want to get, sometimes these things are controversial. To us, they're not. And so if this is controversial, I apologize. But, we will undergo, we'll send the truck company in the front door to search at the same time that we're putting water on the fire from the outside. We don't find those two things to be in conflict with one another at all. So that's basically what happened here is they started an offensive exterior attack. And that's the part where sometimes my buddies will, yell at me about offensive exterior attack. But, we believe that the science shows that can happen simultaneously with initiating a very aggressive search, and that creates the best outcome. So they started an offensive exterior attack while they assigned the next couple rigs to start a primary search of the building, knowing that it was going to high level of index that it was going to be occupied. So that was I think the first three there were engine 7 pulled a line, engine 1 laid into them. Our model, 3-2 model, basically 3 people on the engine, 2 people on the medic. They'll work together because we have like a 90% reliability. So 90% of the time they're together because we've added enough medics to the system so that they're basically in quarters almost all the time. So engine medic 7 were a crew of 5, and they started the offensive exterior attack and some search. Then engine 1 laid in with a medic, and they started a search. And then as Tower 2, which is the first truck company, got there, then they started a 360 to find another way to get in, because at that point we had reports from people exiting the building that there were multiple people trapped. So as they went around what would be the Charlie side, they were met with people pounding on the fiberglass garage doors, roll-up doors, who were trapped inside. So they then found another means of entry, forced the door. They went in and got 2 people out. The truck company did through that side. And then engine 7 and engine 1 or company 1, who at that point we kind of renamed them a search group. That some people, again, don't care for groups because the geographical limitations. I'll use them in a situation like that where I kind of have a pretty good idea where everybody is. So I created a search group out of them, and they finished the primary. And I think they found one more person in there that was unable to ambulate out, that they ended up having to remove through the door that they originally entered, because they were unaware that the truck company had opened a door on the Charlie side. So that's a brief overview, I know, but I think the salient takeaway is, that it was like when Clark called me, if I can, was like, hey, we're interested in this. And we had this conversation about the perception. And Clark and I share some mutual friends, a couple buddies down in Florida and some other people who I talked to about this. And I'm sure some of you guys know Ben Schultz, and Ben and I had chatted a little bit of the perception that, hey, this was a pretty, for lack of a better word again, aggressive tactic or thing that your organization did. I didn't, that sort of caught me, took me aback maybe, or caught me a little off guard, because we didn't view it. It was not that we're any good at anything, or we're a special organization, or we're cool or anything like that. It just was fundamental to what we view the mission to be. So it didn't strike me as being overly aggressive or risky or anything in that sort. It just struck me as there were humans in there, and we take a lot of risk to go get humans, and it fell into that category. So it didn't strike me as being and then the more people I talk to, the more even internally, the more we found that other organizations may not have viewed that as I want to be careful with my words, because we are not a cool organization. We're pretty normal, but it wasn't aggressive. It was just germane to what it is that we're chartered to do for the people that we provide service to. It was just what we were expected to do.
Go ahead, Daryl.
No, I was just saying, I know you want to be careful with your words, but as a friend of mine said, the number one injury in the fire service is feelings. So
I fill out a lot of hurt feelings reports.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I understand what you're saying. You feel like you're just doing your job. You don't feel like you're doing something special, but sometimes it's a little shocking to hear that what you feel is fundamental, other people may not be doing. And even terms like offensive or defensive, sometimes I take, issue with, because we're always being offensive. We're just getting water on it from whichever is the best means we can to get a knock on the fire. It doesn't mean like we're giving up necessarily.
We view it the exact same way. It's just in some circles, you get people that are so primed for a particular response to a word that if you use that word, you don't get a lot of logic or interaction anymore. You get like a primed response of defensiveness. And so, I would make the argument from sitting outside that watching this thing unfold, the offensive exterior attack, controlling the flow path and knocking the fire down, created tenable, or at least extended or helped with tenable conditions so that the crews could search and the people that were in there could be rescued. So, if we had tried to do some sort of complicated lading, an unburned side or something that was probably more like we were all originally taught when we were younger, it would have eaten up a lot of time and given it a lot more time to grow. And so from my observation, watching them be able to, darken the fire down significantly and control the flow path, while on the other side of the building, we were able to open doors so the truck company could go into search without creating an unnecessary flow path, without putting people in danger. To me, it was the picture of like, oh, this is what all this science has taught us to do that has a positive outcome for these people. Great job.
Yeah, that could have easily been a fire where somebody's saying this is a vacant building, this is defensive operation, and slow everybody down. And then you have a lot of fatalities inside of that.
And you guys probably have more. Again, I should have a broader, my myopic lens is probably showing here in terms of the fire service, but that's interesting. Like that's the part that Clark and I kind of touched on a little bit. I would have thought that was aberrant to all fire departments, but apparently it is a thing that happens periodically. I just learned recently that some organizations and to me it sort of ties together. They will not put people on the roof. Well, what happens when you have a fire that needs people on the roof? Like, what do you do? Like, so right. I just found it interesting, the things that I've learned a little bit, that not to say I'm completely ignorant of the American fire service as a whole, but things that I just assumed were universal aren't as universal as I thought.
Yeah. Chief, how many companies responded to that fire?
Man, I think I upgraded that to a second straight away because and I added a bunch of ambulances because I just wasn't sure how many people were going to be in there. So I think we got Oh, now somebody's gonna watch this, and I'm not gonna know our SOP, our response SOP.
Oh, that's right. Just
they're gonna get
so
called out.
you upgraded to a second, right? That's good.
Yeah, we upgraded to a second. I don't remember. We didn't use many of the resources from the second. Second for us gets some command staff rigs, so I did use some of those, overhead guys to go do secondary 360s. We had a pretty robust RIT because I knew, I wasn't like the most excited about having people in there, so we made sure we had a high functioning RIT. We softened the building, did the kind of things that, that takes a few people to make sure you've got that in place. So. I would guess we had 7 or 8 engine companies and 2 truck companies and half dozen medics there, maybe when it was all said and done.
Yep. Now, even you knew people in there. Were you even surprised with the amount of people in that building and the amount of stuff going on inside of a car wash? And if you want, we can start showing some of those pictures if you want, Chief.
Whatever you guys want to show them. This is new to me, and you guys are the formidable podcast experts. So whatever you want to bring up, but. Like all of your cities, and probably some to a greater extent than us, the metro area here is, as housing prices have increased, the marginally housed have become homeless, and it's been a proliferation of homelessness. And so I think, years and years ago, I would have been surprised by the number. According to the company that arrived first, if I remember correctly, and I don't want to misstate, but they were pretty impressed by the number of people fleeing the area on foot when they showed up, indicating that there was, if you look through these slides, I think we found, I don't want to exaggerate, but 12 or 14 of these tents, a couple like full setup, like kind of apartment-y bedroom things and like back rooms. So, I don't want to exaggerate. I do like hyperbole as much as the next person, but there was 20 to 30 people probably living in there. So when they showed up, they saw all of the people who were living in there scattering, and then the last 3 or 4 were the ones that they were able to remove.
Yeah, that's a pretty significant fire load. Now, Chief, you said that this car wash was also connected to a auto shop, correct?
Yeah, there was a vacant like couple bay repair shop, remnants of a gas station, car wash gas station sort of complex right next door that was left over.
Did that have a pit? Did that repair shop have a pit?
It did. And there was some discussion afterwards about, because they searched that, and the company that searched that, if I remember correctly, it's been a minute, and I'm getting older. So you guys, I think A, can appreciate that, and B, you'll offer me some grace that I forget some of this, but they were pretty confused as to how they managed to not crawl into that pit when it was all said and done. Now, like to their point, when I was talking to them afterwards, they probably would have sucked, but we could have found our way out. Like they were not, again, I want to be really careful. We have a humble organization that tries to work hard and provide the right service to our citizens, but they were not, they weren't, the feedback from the crews wasn't like, oh man, our lives were in danger, end of the world. What if we'd crawled into the pit? Their feedback was like, hey, this is what we work hard and train to do and train to be good at. And we were willing to take a certain amount of risk because there were human beings in there to guide those people to safety. And, the only way we could have made sure in this scenario that there wasn't anybody left in there was to complete to the greatest extent possible, as you can see from the pictures, but to complete a primary, that's really the only way we know that there's nobody left in there.
How many square feet do you think, Chief?
Oh, buddy, I knew you started to ask that earlier. I was hoping you were going to move on from that. I would guess it was, I do a fair bit of construction on my days off, so I think I'm all right at this. I would guess 80 by, oh, man, I don't know. I would guess 80 by 20 or 80 feet long by 20, 25 feet was the main part of the building, and then probably a 30 by 30 attached 2-bay deal. So whatever that ends up being, I guess we're in the neighborhood of, just off the top of my head, even though it doesn't matter up with the numbers I just gave you, I guess we're in the neighborhood of 4,000 to 5,000 square feet, probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Decent sized building.
It's just real long, as you would imagine a car wash to be.
I'm thinking of a couple things. One is, when you guys do commercial inspections, is that done at the company level?
It is. We do building inspections as the company.
And do they get eyes on buildings that are vacant or out of business?
Yeah, so it'll be on a list, and this will surprise you guys. Maybe your organizations are different than mine, but since I got hired in the fire service, God, I'm going to be old, 30 years ago, we've asked our people to start doing 27,000 things, and we've taken none away. And so the efficacy and the time we could dedicate to those company level inspections, like we do them, but to say that, we dedicate an hour to each building would probably be a lie. But I think we are, all of our companies, I think would be safe to say, especially in that sort of busier corridor up north, are aware of most, if not all, of their vacant commercial structures and the hazards that are posed in them. Because, there's another gas station down the road that I think we had our third working fire in like the last year, just the other day. And then there was a big vacant, like old grocery store up in Station 1's area where I used to work that I think, they went to like and these aren't like full working room and contents fires. These are trash fires inside a building, right? Like this one that we're talking about today got into the structure and had pretty good fire load, but a lot of these are a tent on fire in a vacant, I shouldn't say a lot. We're not running 1,000 of these, but there's my hyperbole. But the ones that Station 1 was running, I think it was the 4th or 5th time they'd been into that building for basically a trash fire in an empty, I forget what that occupancy was originally. It might have been a grocery store, but a pretty good sized building where there's just, you can think of it almost as a outdoor fire under a 30-foot roof, right? Kind of like what Clark was talking about in the beginning, right? Like they can go in with a water can and put out the tent or the barbecue grill or the grocery cart or whatever that's on fire, but they still got to make sure that everybody in there is out or herded out.
Right. We're at about the halfway mark, and I'd just like to throw another shout out to our brothers and sisters at Key Hose. We absolutely appreciate your help, and we appreciate your commitment to the fire service. The majority of trainings, hands-on trainings I've ever been to, Key Hose shows up with truckloads of hose and allows us to get our hands on it, and they support the majority of the trainings I've ever attended. So we do appreciate Key Fire Hose and their support of our podcast here. Real quick, Chief, one thing I want to say, shout out absolutely on the RIT team. Statistically speaking, Project Mayday from Don Abbott, 41% of all Maydays occur in commercial structures. So with that being said, myself, I'm thinking if we're going to a commercial, I want a RIT team. I want a RIT team early, and I want a capable RIT team, not the crew that's been on their asses for years and years and years and just don't want to do anything. And if we do get the RIT assignment, I'm going to be extremely motivated, and I'm going to be paying attention, listening to the radio, going to the command post, trying to figure out where everyone is inside this building, because there is a strong chance that we will get deployed on a commercial structure. So
yeah, we allow our RIC teams to, I know some don't allow them to do, any work other than, wait. But to do some proactive things that keep people from becoming trapped, like removing HUD windows, window bars, things of that nature, which is going to be really important on a vacant structure because there's just so many windows, boarded up and security of that nature. So it's just something to think about, of being really proactive. And even if nobody's no civilians are found in there, we're in there, and that sometimes it could take some time to get these things opened up. So if you're not allowing RIT teams to do that, I would really consider an additional ladder company or engine company that's capable of doing that to get things opened up.
Darryl, you hit to make a good point, like with the RIT. Like, most people, and it's one of the things I always share with our people and then in classes, is the RIT, the first person to the RIT for is the incident commander. Is to walk up that incident commander, and if he doesn't have a strong grasp of accountability or anything else, their job is to make sure that they can help with that accountability process, because they're mobile, they're walking around the structure, they're getting eyeballs in the structure, to be able to look at it and come back to tell the chief, like, hey, you got a company in the rear, you got a company there, because most RIT, they don't want to go to work. I don't know any RIT that shows up and says, I can't wait to go rescue one of my own. You don't want that. And it's really important in the commercial building. I appreciate the chief saying that what he did on that, because we don't run the commercial building fire as much as we run the residential building fire. We run a residential building fire every 64 seconds in the United States. We don't run that as a commercial fire. But What's the most notable line of duty deaths we know? Multiple loss of life is commercial buildings. And, it's a hard transition for a lot of people if they are usually running residential building fires, which, statistically you are. And now you got to transition to a commercial building fire tactic. You're invariably going to miss something. So to have that writ and be proactive, to be able to help an incident commander, to have a good grasp of it, is, that's a key point.
Yeah. And Dan, with that said, and I was no chief, so like your guys' input and Sean's as well, but we started off looking at a picture of a Walmart, and the incident commander they're going to have their minds on a lot of other things like additional ambulances and traffic control and things of that nature. It looks like there was snow in one of the pictures. There may be weather issues, but if a RIT team can't reasonably cover the space, they can contact the incident commander and say, hey, I think we need a second RIT team to cover the back of this building or the side of this building and make a RIT.
There's a delicate balance, right? I mean, like before I retired, we have a RIT, task force that comes when you get a working fire, and that gave you another unit, another EMS unit, and a battalion. So you had a division, essentially a group. That was a RIT group that had its own supervisor, had plenty of units to be able to diversify and go to other places. But it is a balance, right? Because, you don't want your RIT to be larger than your entire assignment that's actually operating. And how many people can exhaust that many resources? And, it's easy for me to say when you have, as many resources we had to be able to do that. But if you don't, you got to be creative, right? I mean, you might start off and you might have to rely on mutual aid to do exactly what you're talking about. Daryl's like, if I'm going to make you in charge of the RIT, not only is your job is to make that building so you have an easy access to get into it and rescue one of our own, but also help with the accountability, but also be vocal. I mean, there's no way I'm getting around this 20,000 square foot unit or building with 4 people in the engine and doing anything.
Right. And it's like a strip mall. Now you're going to do a 360, a strip mall. Hell, you got to call an Uber, right?
Yeah.
Jimmy Davis, what are your thoughts, brother, on the TV show Famous?
Yeah, a couple things here too with that, Clark, starting with you with those big boxes and that. You're not talking one RIT team, you're talking multiple RIT teams, all right? Wherever companies are working, you're going to have a RIT team. Can you imagine having one on the scene stage on the alpha side? You have an emergency somewhere in the rear where companies are working. Think about that. Remember, reflex time. What's the time to acknowledge, get themselves ready, get to the back of that place, and then go to work? You're going to need multiple RITs, and it just dawned on me too. One more thing on that Walmart, which I wanted to ask you. Now, do the employees at Walmart, do they have a policy or maybe like a checklist during fire alarm or fire conditions? Are buildings of that size required to do formal fire training or fire drills in such a high hazard building like that?
In Clark County, no. They are not required to. Not required to. Whether they do it or not, that's on them. And one thing that I do, Jimmy, is when we do our business inspections, I always ask the owner or the manager, I said, okay, do you have an evacuation plan? And guess what they say 100% of the time? Oh, yeah. We have it. Because the fire department, oh, yeah, we have it. And I said, okay, can we talk about it? Well, what's the plan? And one guy told me, well, our plan is if the building's on fire, we're going to go ahead and get out. I said, great. That's a great plan. But
30,000 foot view, Clark, 30,000 foot view.
Yeah. And I offer these people, I said, hey, if you're interested, we would like you to help you develop an evacuation plan. And when I first started doing this, my guy's like, what are you doing, man? That's of all the other stuff we do, like Chief was talking about, of all the stuff we do, now we have to help people do evacuation drills. And I asked them, who is going to benefit from the evacuation drill, right? When we arrive and I've got the manager standing at the designated evacuation point and can look me in the eye and say, I have all of my employees accounted for. Who's that going to benefit, right? So, right, that's why I say, hey, if you guys want, and something simple, right? It's like make sure we have a rally point, make sure all the guys are accounted for. You have if someone goes to lunch, make sure they're out of the building, whatever. It's really simple, but it benefits us if those people are motivated and actually practice their drills. All right. And if we want to practice, I ask them, hey, Can we do a drill in your building? Can we arrive like it's on fire? You can do your evacuation drill, and we're going to show up like it's on fire. We're going to pull hose through your building. And several times that's worked really well. It's worked really well.
Yeah, and then for Sean, if you were to have that fire again that we saw, and surprisingly, looking at those pictures, man, that's amazing. But you know what? It's like this far in your career, nothing really phases you, man. But if you were to have that fire again, did you have any takeaways or lessons that you learned from this that you can apply to? I'm sure if there's one, there's going to be another one. To better prepare yourself for this. How did it go?
I mean, I think every time we do one of these, right, we don't do them every day, or you guys might, but we don't. And so we try to like do a post-instant critique and look at things that went well and things that didn't went well. You know, I want to be, again, careful here, but this one, by hook or by crook, every once in a while, one goes pretty well. You know, I'm sure you guys have had a few of those in your career where you're like, oh man, if I was eligible, I'd retire today, because that was probably as good as it was going to. I got left and I was like, man, if I was at Rule 80,
that fire accidentally went out.
Yeah, if I was at Rule 80, I might go today. But you know, I think that was a reflection in the same in you guys' organizations, I'm sure, of that. You know, we just had a lot of really good crews that were all together that night, that all worked together. You know, there's certainly some in the weeds kind of things I do different as an incident commander in terms of divisions a little bit faster, a more robust search group. I did want to comment just real brief on Daryl's point. We call it softening the building. So when we assign RIT, they're empowered to soften the building. So they throw ladders, they pull windows, bars, or if we have them, they pull plywood. You know, they're all taught. You know, I think like experience in different places I've worked, like, you know, we're right at that precipice where we it's really hard. We're big enough to have enough resources. We're busy enough to do some cool stuff, but it's really hard to get lost. In other places I've worked that were bigger, you could get lost. So it's hard to get lost. And as such, we hold our people pretty accountable. And so, you know, we expect them to have a really good understanding of like flow path if they're going to go soften the building, right? And so if they soften the building and they do something that causes a flow path disruption, or do something on the windward side, because we get some pretty amazing winds here that causes us some heartache, you know, we certainly address that. You know, we don't do it with an iron fist, but we will certainly make sure. So we're in this weird kind of unique spot, and you know, as a special district, we operate a little different than cities, so we like that gives us some advantages too. So all that to say, you know, the RIT guys did a great job of softening the building, opening up some alternate means of egress and ingress to get people out. There was really good radio communication. So really the things that needed to be changed, I shudder to admit, but all landed in my lap in terms of just, it went pretty well, but there were just small nuanced changes I could make to divisions and groups and things like that, just a little bit quicker, you know, to sort of, but you know, again, it doesn't happen all the time. We have more than our fair share of nightmares that you know, I've run more than my fair share of fires where I was like, man, I hope nobody calls about that one, because I was rough, but this one just happened, you know, to go pretty decent. So the things that needed to be changed, I would put mostly in my lap, and I wouldn't put them as being, you know, huge changes, but certainly things I could have done better to make it a little more efficient.
Good.
But the crews, and I'm sure you guys is the same way, that, you know, and you know, that particular firehouse, Sevens, and then up the road from them is Ones. There's two of our busier firehouses. So they, you know, those are the groups that you expect to excel, right? And the truck company from above Colfax is kind of our busier, if you can say we have one, you know, our busiest sort of tower truck company. So you expect them, you know, we just have high expectations, and they met them.
Yeah, I don't know what was done here, but when I look at this building, it's just my mind is always going to engine operations, because that's you know, largely been my experience and passion. But there, and Clark mentioned it, there's a high amount of fuel load in there, and we never know how much fuel there's going to be. We just know we have a commercial building, and we have a fire in it. And I've always selected, I can't say always, but I, you know, select my hose line on the building type more than the amount of fire showing, because it looks like a lot of those tents are still intact. So I'm not not exactly sure how, you were there, but how much was involvement. It looks like it was a really good stop from that offensive exterior stream, but I would want to use the longest reaching stream I could that can, really start darkening down from a safe position. And some people will be hesitant for a large line, but you may have a high fuel load. And once it gets to the time to have to start crawling around and move in for final extinguishment, then we could bring in a smaller line if it's more appropriate. But I wouldn't hesitate to really bomb the beach before we send in infantry.
Yeah.
That's sort of precisely what they did. Is the to speak, if I can, to your point a little. I never worked a day, I don't think, on any of our like tower truck companies. I spent my whole career on the medic or on an engine, just because you got to go out more often, and I just liked leaving the station, even if they were nonsense calls. I spent most of my career up, at that busy station up north. But I think that the biggest impact on outcome here was the quick knockdown, right? The quick knockdown enabled. I think you could have probably called. I'd have to look at the timeline, but you probably could have called fire under control as one of our benchmarks, and everybody has individual benchmarks. But I think you could have called fire under control well before, or may have even the people were the victims were out of the building. That's how effective and quick the knockdown was. And not getting too much in the weeds, they did it in a way where if they had needed to, they could have done an extended reach lay, is what we call it, horizontal standpipe. Again, the vernacular varies, and sometimes I get in trouble because to people the differences are a mile wide, and to me they're nuanced. But they set themselves up where they could have, with an immense amount of efficiency, extended that line the whole distance of that building with lightweight 2.5. So they did. They were pretty on top of that, and that's a testament to them. Not that all happened long before I got there. I would have just gotten in the way.
Yeah,
I found a place to park that would have been
lightweight 2.5, Chief.
What's that?
Lightweight 2.5.
Yeah, we have some of that for our high rise packs and our horizontal or extended reach lays. Yeah.
Okay, good. Daryl Liggins.
Yeah,
Let's talk a little bit about the ghost ship. Right, very significant. It's a couple of years old now, but Daryl used to work at 13s, and 13s was almost across the street from the ghost ship. Right, you could have hit it with the golf ball if you're a decent golfer. It would have taken me 4 swings, but that's okay.
Yeah, just a little. I forget how much time passes, but I spent a majority of my time as an officer at a firehouse in the middle of Oakland. Pretty close to the center of town, called the Fruitvale District. There's a little bit of every type of building, and definitely an older part of the city. There's a lot of mostly balloon frame buildings, a lot of warehouses, trains, subway. There's a waterfront. There's a little bit of everything. So you don't have a clear division of residential and commercial. You could have a place recycling cans right next to a house, and then next to an apartment building. So anyway, that firehouse was busy, so I like to work there. And I forget how much time passes, so maybe not everybody is familiar with this fire that is significant in the history of the fire service now. But 8 years ago, on December 2nd, 2016, there was a warehouse fire damn near across the street from the firehouse. It was on the block across the street, but like the other side of that block. And I don't know what time of day. I think it was 11. Oh, let me look this up. 11:20 at night. There was a number of people banging on the firehouse door and people calling that the building was on fire. It was thought to just be like, it just looked like a vacant warehouse. Heavy smoke. It was obviously on fire. early call for an additional alarm, but there was a art studio, like a makeshift art studio in there, a makeshift staircase made with like pallets. There was an RV, pianos, a lot of lacquered wood and things of that nature. And they made a very aggressive attack in the doorway. They were in there for at least a bottle change, maybe 30 minutes, and things are just deteriorating. The fire load was insane. It was well beyond what you can extinguish with large hose lines. And there was 36 people that passed away, all trapped in a mezzanine above with the fire starting on the floor below. There was no indication on arrival that there was anybody in there. It was, I was not at the fire, so I'll make that clear. And I was not at that assigned to that firehouse during that time. I was a lieutenant there prior to that fire. And then I went back there as a captain after that. But I'll tell you what, the fire in Warwick, Rhode Island was a very large loss of life in an occupied, concert. And I remember that shortly after I started Oakland Fire, and it would have never occurred to me that the next largest loss of life in a building fire would be across the street from my firehouse. You just never know. And I think it was shocking to everybody that there were so many people in there. And Sean, that's why I asked how the inspections went. At the time, the city of Oakland populated inspections based on business addresses. And since there was no business, there was no inspection. So that's now just changed to addresses where, all buildings, commercial buildings are inspected. But yeah, you just pulled up a picture there. It went defensive. There was no ability to rescue anyone, but a few people did make it out. Some people that lived there. The ATF couldn't prove it was electrical, but it was, they pretty much know it was a probable electrical fire.
They had stealing power from the business next door, correct?
That isn't my understanding. There was, I think, maybe just a larger use of power than intended, but it wasn't meant to be lived in, and people were living in there, and they had a party, and the loss of life could have been much larger. But Oakland's street numbering system, for people not familiar, there are each number. This was 31st Avenue, but there's also an East 31st, and then there is a 31st Street. So some people got invited to this party thinking it was on 31st Street, which is downtown, and didn't go to 31st Avenue. So there could have been a much larger loss of life. But what it really showed is you don't know what this looked, for all intents, that it was a vacant building or a closed warehouse at night. And an aggressive attack was not able to suppress this fire or save those lives. However, it did show the need to still use these aggressive tactics and, make the assumption that people are in there until not.
Yeah.
And yeah, they did go to the roof on this, and they were able to get off in time. But yeah, you could see the exposure. There was, quite a bit of businesses down the block there, but it was traumatizing to a lot of members. There was a recent academy that came out. So some of the people, this was their first structure fire that just came out of the academy. And it was very, very, very prolonged removal of the bodies that were in there with the assistance of the ATF and local law enforcement and all. And, when we talk about can people be in the building, I remember, just going to something, lighter. I remember doing drills with firefighters on vacant buildings, and there's a vacant house boarded up, and we throw a ladder up there and we go to the roof so you can practice, walking on the roof and throwing a ladder. And this guy comes running out of this house like, whoa, what the hell is going? I mean, I just startled this guy, and it was an occupied building. Looked vacant as could be to me with graffiti and plywood and everything. But the house next door that looked occupied was actually a vacant building. And something similar where we went to a house the day after a fire to show crews what we had done. And this was a real, significant fire. And we go around the building into the roof, and again, some people coming out. What the heck's going on? Well, they were afraid to, use Red Cross and these services, thinking they might get deported or something like that. So they decided to keep living in this burned out building. So we never know, I'm not going to say we're going to be in undue harm and something we know to be vacant, but in these times, we have people taking money under the table to live and have bedding and in the back of warehouses and things of that nature. And we can find people where we would never expect to find them. And we see that a lot on EMS calls and inspections and things of that nature.
Yeah. Daryl, I think the most significant thing you said was all those people are in there and you had no idea. You had no idea there was that many people inside of that structure, a vacant structure. With that, the fuel load was phenomenal. Just phenomenal. I've seen pictures of the fuel load before the fire. Just like you said, it looks like a TGI Fridays. Every single square foot of wall is packed with furniture and stuff on the walls and things. And to think I saw that it looked like an operating restaurant or something. And to think that was a vacant building, an unoccupied building. So just significant.
Yeah, we drove past it every day. I went to work for many, many years, but just a few months ago, they have finally, tore that structure down now into a vacant lot.
Yeah. Jimmy Davis, what you got, brother? Final thoughts. We're going to land the plane.
All right. Put your seatbelts on.
All right.
Dale, I remember that's a landmark. It's a landmark study, and I was thinking and thinking out loud to myself is that, man, there's going to be another one, and what do we do as a fire service? What can we do, man, to prevent these from happening? Because they're going to happen again. Everything we talked about, and I'm thinking just being vigilant in your first due area, anything that may stir up some suspicion, maybe do walkthroughs. I give the building a good shakedown. But it's sad, but it's true. History has a tendency to just repeat itself again. So those were my recommendations on it. High alert, be vigilant, reporting suspicious activities, turn it over to proper channels. And maybe that might have some effect.
Situational awareness, right? As you're driving around your first in, maintain situational awareness. Look at buildings. Hey, that's a vacant building. Hey, maybe we should walk around the vacant building and see if we have any signs of life, right? So, good. Chief, final thoughts, brother.
Oh, buddy, you've dug about as deep as this well goes, I think, so for the last hour. So. No, man, it's fascinating for me to hear from different people, like kind of no matter where you go, there you are, right? And it to a greater or lesser extent, we're all kind of looking at the same things. And I think one of the I'll probably try not to throw things at me for this, and I'll be brief, but like every couple of years we change hose loads, right? Because there's the newest, greatest hose load, and I always try to make this argument that it doesn't matter what it is. What matters is we just trained on it and we're good at it. And if you switch every 2 years, that makes me happy, because that means every 2 years we're out there pulling that. I hope we change ground ladders and hose loads every 2 years, so that every couple of years crews are forced to go out and work with them. And that segue into this, which is I think one of the cool things about the last couple fires we've had is that it's, it has really given pause for people to go, man, I got to go drive by that building at the corner, such and such and such and such, because it never occurred to me, but I think there might be people living in there. Or, we have these tunnels that run through under the light rail, and their whole cities down there. They got fiat currencies, they got governments. I'm pretty sure, like they're their own civilizations in these tunnels underneath the light rail. And by definition, as I'm sure you guys all know, they're confined spaces. But every once in a while, we got drag hose lines down there because there's people living in these 3 foot tall, 8 foot wide tunnels or whatever. And so I think that the salient takeaway to me is that the best part about it is it's really I don't want to say rattled cages or shook trees, but I think it's just caused our crews to pause for a minute and go, just pay a little more attention when they're out driving around. And, oh man, you can have, I was reading somewhere, it might've been El Paso, about a tent city that went up and they lost like 4 or 5 humans and it was just a homeless camp, but it moved, the fire load was so fast, it moved through there, and I don't, the gist I got, and I don't want to say where it was, maybe it wasn't El Paso, I shouldn't say that, but wherever it was, they just didn't see that coming. They just rolled up, we're going to pull their booster line. And the next thing you know, they got a fast moving kind of version of a wildland urban interface fire where 2 or 3 people perished. So I think the good part about these conversations and what they lead to is it just gives people pause to open their eyes and pay a little more attention, because that, I'll steal your phrase, Clark, that situational awareness is what will give rise to successful outcomes, I think.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief. Chief
That's
Shaw.
as long as you're going to get out of me.
All right, it was good. That was good. Chief Shaw, what you got for us, brother? Final thoughts.
Sean, you hit the 20 minutes, man. Well done.
Yep.
No, I think great conversation, and there's 2 things that I think that really resonate with me. Is one, it was something we talked about very early, is that we cannot get caught into this mentality, as we were talking about in the very beginning. Like, we run a residential building fire every 64 seconds in the United States, so we tend to approach everything with the residential tactics in mind, and we go to this dynamic thing called a fire. And what we expect of our company officers and firefighters is they have dynamic decision making. And what we say as guardrails is what your operation manuals are, and there's no fire that assimilates to manuals. And so that's why we have thinking firefighters operate there. Situations like what Sean ran and what Daryl talked about. I mean, they're the exact reason why. That's what we love about this job, but it can be immensely frustrating. Is that you think you're prepared until you actually run one of those things. You go, what the hell was that? And it's really, really important for us to figure it out. And we had this conversation in my job, and we kind of dove into, hey, there's a difference between vacant and abandoned, but neither one of those negates you from not doing a search. Like, we're going to do a search. It's just a matter of when you do the search. And that's, again, goes back to thinking firefighters. But the reason we came up with that language is to say, hey, vacant is because of the turnover of a lot of places. Hey, it could still be occupied. There's no one living in it right now. But an abandoned place, it might be derelict, it might be falling down. So that should be a trigger to the incident commander, like, yeah, this building may not be able to be sustained or stay upright with fire in it for a prolonged amount of time because it's a completely derelict building. And I need to think about my strategy and tactics, but that doesn't negate, whether we do a search or not. It's about that risk calculus. And routinely when we do classes, I always ask people, like, we want our firefighters and company officers to make this incredible risk assessment. Show me what your risk assessment program is you teach your people. And they don't. They leave it to experience. And hopefully you're with someone who teaches you risk assessment. So it's a slippery slope, and it's fires like this, when we talk about it like this, where it's free experience, right? It just adds to our catalog that we should be remembering these and going, I heard Daryl, I heard Sean talk about this. I got to rethink the way I'm doing it. So good conversation. Thanks for joining us, Sean. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, Sean.
Genuine pleasure was all mine, man. I hope it at least didn't completely fail to meet expectations.
Yeah, well, it wasn't the worst hangout we've ever had.
Well, I'll take it. That's it, man. I don't have to be faster. I just got to be faster than the slowest gazelle,
Yeah, exactly. All right, brothers and sisters out there, we appreciate you listening. Any questions, you can reach out to any of us. We're all on social media and stuff like that. Be happy to answer any questions you might have. Stay safe out there. Looking forward to hearing from you again next month. All right. Thank you.